It was the dawn of the third age of podcasting, 30 years after the series had launched.
The Babylon podcast was a dream given form. Its goal, to discuss the place where humans and aliens could work out their differences peacefully.
It's a port of call, home away from home for established fans, newbies, Jon, Blaine, and guests.
Humans and aliens wrapped in 2,500,000 tons of spinning metal, all alone in the night.
It could be a dangerous place.
Wait, what?
But it's our last, best hope for peace.
This is the story of the last of the Babylon stations.
The year is 2024.
The name of the podcast is
Babylon 5, 30 years later.
Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of Babylon 5, 30 years later. The show where at least two people sit down and go through every episode of Babylon 5 and every made-for-TV or DVD movie 30 years after the original broadcast. And those two that you'll hear every time are myself, Blaine Dowler, and my co-host, Jon M. Wilson. How are you doing, Jon?
Blaine, I'm doing okay. I just woke up this morning and, it felt like I just said goodbye to my wife the night before, but now she's dead. But if you want to make out, I'm down with it.
Okay. It's a little tough through Skype.
We can make it work, Blaine. Get creative.
John jokes about this. I was seriously tempted to introduce him as John Carter today.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, should we explain that or no?
Let's go into the episode, I think, because it's a pretty cool episode, but there are some choices.
Yes. Okay. This podcast is scheduled to come out on November 30th, 2024, because The Long Dark, directed by Mario DeLeo and written by Scott Frost, came out on November 30th, 1994.
That means we missed the Doctor Who anniversary last week, and I'm sad now. Doctor Who turned 61 last week.
Yeah, you are absolutely right. We did miss that.
Sad. I also remember that the 23rd is Doctor Who because the 22nd is JFK.
Funny, I remember when JFK was shot because it preempted Doctor Who.
Yeah, like those dates are linked in my mind, and if I ever forget the order, it's easy because, like you said, the JFK news distracted a lot of viewers from watching Doctor Who. So in a very, very rare example, they reran the episode the following week before the new episode, which in 1963 reruns just weren't a thing.
Oh, and it proved so successful that now BBC kind of fairly regularly shows new episodes at 2 or 3 different time slots in a week, so that everyone can catch up. And not just Doctor Who. Not just Doctor Who.
Although that's probably the most important one that the BBC does. Let's be honest.
Yeah, as far as I'm concerned. My Coronation Street following family might disagree, but...
Does your family follow Corey? That's amazing. I did not know that. How does Pippa feel about it? Does she watch?
No, not the immediate family. It's my sister, her brother-in-law, or my brother-in-law, and their one of their kids.
Okay.
And I keep up with Corey. My mom lost interest in recent years, but
yeah.
Yes, growing up, she was watching Corey daily.
Soap operas can probably have that effect. I'm watching Dark Shadows, which is, of course, a late 60s soap opera. And there are periods when I'm really into it, and there are periods when I'm like, okay, let's just move this forward, please.
Anyway, speaking of moving forward, our episode, The Long Dark. So we've got a couple of plot threads going that are fairly closely related this time. So a sleeper ship arrives at Babylon 5. Thankfully, we discover it is not just randomly showing up, but it was programmed to change course and hone in on any signals it finds because it was early space exploration from Earth. So, yeah, it's not completely accidental that it shows up at Babylon 5. It was on a path, and Babylon 5 had the strongest signal, so it came to Babylon 5, tracking that signal. When it arrives, they find that the ship that's over 100 years old still has one survivor on board in a life tube. They bring it in, board it. There are 2 life tubes. One of them contains a desiccated corpse, and the other contains an attractive woman around Dr. Franklin's age who starts to have medical issues as soon as they open the chamber with this big rush of air and light and possibly steam or something. They get her to med lab and try and get her stable and healthy. While they're investigating, they find that the other passenger died for no apparent reason. It was not a mechanical failure. He appears to have been murdered with all of his organs removed. And as things progress, it appears that there is some sort of alien creature that the ship is not equipped to handle that killed the husband and is now preying on people on Babylon 5. I say it becomes clear, it takes time for it to be clear that it is some difficult to detect creature, and not the woman who was in this too. While things are progressing, we learn that the dead man was her husband, although that doesn't stop her from starting to develop feelings for Dr. Franklin. Although, thankfully, they do point out that things were never really great with her and her husband. They had split up multiple times. Still.
Okay, did they point that out? Because I did not catch that.
They did, yes.
Okay, good.
I want to say in Act 3, she says, things were never perfect. They split up a few times.
I mean, we're going to still talk about it because it's still a questionable thing, but at least that's there. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes it a little less of an issue, but there's still issues that, yes, we will dig into. The other plot thread is about a character named Amos, who keeps getting written off as crazy. He is a veteran of the Minbari War that has been written off as either crazy or a compulsive liar by all sorts of mental health experts. But as another soldier, Garibaldi recognizes some of the dreams he's having because Amos talks in his sleep. He ended up in security because he was essentially preaching without a license. But as Garibaldi talks to him, he starts to think, well, maybe this guy's not completely crazy, because what he is describing is consistent with what we're seeing for what's happening on this station. And the ship passed very close to the moon that Amos was stationed on when all this stuff went down during the war. And Amos says that this creature feeds on them, and a piece of him was still in that creature. So somehow Amos was rescued and the creature let him leave, did not go with Amos. This time, it boarded the ship and went with the passengers. And ultimately, Amos knowingly sacrifices his life to draw this invisible creature out into a position where the station personnel could finally gun it down and end the threat. And then finally, the woman who was in the life tube, now that she's been cleared of all charges, she and Dr. Franklin have been getting much, much closer, but she at least is mature enough to recognize she is not ready for a relationship. I mean, from her perspective, it's been maybe a couple of days since she and her husband said goodnight to each other, and now he's dead, and it's 100 years later, and their mission is kind of defunct because the Centauri gave humans jump gate technology, so they beat them out to the rim. So she's going to go back to Earth, figure things out, but maybe when she's got her head sorted, she might come back to Dr. Franklin. So did I leave out anything major?
No, I think that's it. So, there are several things in here that I really, really like. The story trope of being in space and waking somebody up who's been in a deep space stasis for a long time, and for them it's now the future. That's been done a few times, but it's often when it's done in a new way, it can be pretty interesting. Of course, there's Space Seed, there's Futurama, there's lots of things out there where people wake up and suddenly it's the future. Rip Van Winkle, I guess, if you want to go way back. And so having that be here is cool, but I found that they didn't actually use that very much for her character. Like, they didn't really tell that story. They dealt with her trauma, and they dealt with her being under suspicion, but they didn't deal with the fact that, oh, it's 100 years later and I'm in the future. Other than a few, sad moments where, oh, I lost 100 years.
Yeah, there's tons where people are catching her up on things, but it's not like, even when they first pulled Captain America out of the ice in Avengers 4, that was 20 years later.
Mm-hmm.
And he was still having issues. Not over 100. And not going out there to meet aliens and then being surrounded by them, and instead of being excited, being kind of creeped out.
Right.
So some of this, I don't know how much of it is because of the inexperience of our writer and director. So the director is Mario DeLeo. I say inexperience, I should have specifically said inexperience with Babylon 5. DeLeo had previously directed for The Equalizer, which was a show JMS really enjoyed, so he was hiring their directors, such as Richard Compton, who didn't work out so well. This is his first of 3 episodes directing on Babylon 5, all 3 of which will be in Season 2. He also worked often as a cinematographer on things like The Untouchables. So he has 11 directorial credits, and this is number 10.
Mm-hmm.
So he had previously directed Alfred Hitchcock Presents, Miami Vice, Crime Story, The Equalizer, A Man Called Hawk, Baywatch, The Untouchables, and Xena Warrior Princess. Now, Scott Free was invited because, again, if JMS likes shows you've worked on in the past, he will reach out to you and say, hey, come do stuff on my shows. So Scott Frost, had actually written for 4 series before this. A TV movie called Past Tense, as well as episodes of Life Goes On the Air, and Twin Peaks. And it was the Twin Peaks credit that caught JMS's attention, and that's why he sent out the invite. So he would go on to write episodes of, Flipper, Welcome to Paradox, and Andromeda, as well as others.
All right.
So, and we will hear more about Twin Peaks in the future, too.
We will. That's something we're coming back to.
Yeah.
But not in 30 years.
No, and not just because, like I said, JMS likes it, so he hires or tries to hire people. Fortunately, he's got a poor memory for names, so we're going to see that show up again. Yeah, so I'm wondering, considering that neither the writer nor director had worked on the show before, and that they had to start going when all they had to work from were a few dailies from the season premiere to see Bruce Boxleitner in action. So they had season 1, some footage. Frost openly admits that even though he was a science fiction fan, he doesn't think he'd ever watched a full episode of the series. He was just kind of watching the footage that they sent him to get a feel for the actors and for the show. So some things I found didn't quite gel. Knowing the series, not just what we've already seen, but having watched through it before, it struck me as odd that A story with the sleeper was wrapped up in one episode. That felt like the kind of thing where if they did it, it felt like that they should, open her up in one episode, but then take a few episodes to have her go through what she was going through.
Mm-hmm.
So, and this, just to cover our bases here, she was played by Anne-Marie Johnson. IMDb says she is best known for playing Althea Tibbs in 118 episodes of In the Heat of the Night, which is based on a fantastic movie. It won Best Picture, so I covered that with Trey Hooks in our 99 Years 100 Films series. It's actually rapidly become one of my favorite movies of all time. Not sure how I feel about the series here. It had 2 movie sequels I haven't seen yet, and then spawned to series. But in that first movie, Virgil Tibbs says he's never been married. And then they introduced his wife in the first sequel. So I don't know exactly how that works.
He lied.
Could be, but that doesn't seem to be in character for that particular individual. We'll have to see.
Right.
And the actress also had a guest spot on Season 8, Episode 6 of The X-Files, Red Rum. The one in which Joe Morton's character is experiencing the week in reverse and has been accused of murdering his wife. Has to solve her murder before it happens. So it's one of the better Season 8 entries. Season 8, I think, was a fairly strong season that gets a bad rap because that's the season where Robert Patrick came in and David Duchovny was mostly absent.
Yeah, I don't have any experience really with that series. In fact, looking through her stuff, there's a lot of things that she's been in multiple episodes of that I just have not watched.
Yeah, that's where I'm at too. So In the Heat of the Night I want to get to. She's done 18 episodes of JAG. She has done 14 episodes of Melrose Place, 23 of In Living Color, 66 of What's Happening Now.
She was on That's So Raven as a recurring character, Donna Cabana.
Yeah, so she has an extensive list of credits that's filled with stuff that I just haven't watched. The X-Files stands out because that's the one thing I saw, and it was an uncredited part that I honestly don't remember. Now, our other primary guest star.
Oh, yes.
Yes, this is one that is much better known, especially to science fiction fans. Dwight Schultz is possibly best known for playing Lieutenant Barclay on the Berman and Braga era Star Treks, mostly Next Generation and its movies, but he also showed up in Voyager. At least I don't recall him on Deep Space Nine or Enterprise. Enterprise would have been the tougher one.
Yeah, he wouldn't have been on Enterprise. I don't think he ever showed up in Deep Space Nine. I don't think they ever did that. They brought him in on Voyager because they started to have contact with the Alpha Quadrant and they were bringing in familiar Next Generation characters. But no, I don't think he was ever on Deep Space Nine.
No. For a lot of us, he first came to our attention from the A-Team.
Oh, that's right. I keep forgetting he was in that. I know I saw the A-Team as a kid, but I was never a big watcher of the A-Team.
Yeah, I tried to watch it. It premiered when I was, it premiered in the year I was 6. I don't remember. I haven't looked up the exact premiere date.
He has more Voyager credits than Next Generation credits. Just barely, but he has 6 episodes of Voyager and 5 episodes of The Next Generation. If you count First Contact, then that evens it out, 6 and 6. But yeah, I was surprised by that. That's funny.
Yeah, because I tend to think of him as a next-gen character. But yeah, he showed up on Voyager quite a bit. But yeah, he was Howling Mad Murdoch in 97 episodes of the A-Team.
I didn't recognize him at first, and part of it is because his voice, the way he presents himself in this, is so different to the stammering, insecure person in Next Generation. And part of that is that in the Next Generation, he uses a much higher treble for his voice. Just the timbre of how he speaks is higher. Here he's down in his chest, and talking like he's a broken man. And to be fair, he is. But it's just with the hair being different and the voice being different, I did not recognize him at first.
Yeah, he definitely sets himself apart. So he's got acting talent. He's lost some popularity with fandom because he is very vocal about his political views, which are very far to the right.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
So, looking at his IMDb, I didn't realize this before, but he's been providing incidental voices for Final Fantasy for games 10, 12, 13, and their sequels for the English versions.
Huh.
And in the Superman Returns video game, he was the voice of Mr. Mxyzptlk.
Really? I should go look that up and hear him.
Yeah. So yeah, he definitely plays the part very well. There's actually an episode of Next Generation he's not in that was written with him in mind. The original plan for the next phase was for he and Geordi to be put out of phase.
Oh, instead of him and Ro?
And then at some point they switched it to Ensign Ro, and when I found out about that ever since, I have been wishing that I lived in the version of the universe where they kept Barclay and swapped Geordi with Ro. Because the fact that Barclay is the ranking officer, but Ro would very much take charge, I thought that would lead to a very interesting dynamic to see those two together.
Yeah, that would be fun. Those are two characters we never got to see bounce off each other, and that would be fun.
Anyway, we try not to talk too much about other series. So there are a few other guest spots, but none of them are super prominent. Right, we've got Jennifer Anglin as Alien 1, Neil Bradley as Alien 2, James Kiriyama-Lem as a med tech. Kim Strauss returns. He's one of those actors they go to for various aliens.
Mm-hmm.
He's the Markab ambassador when the League of Non-Aligned Worlds demands a meeting saying, hey, there's something going on with this woman, get rid of her or we will.
Okay, is he the one with no nose?
Yeah.
I was going to look up his species because I feel like we've seen them before.
We have. So they're the Markab. I should have mentioned this in the recap. So Jakar is actually curious when they're saying, no, this is a soldier of evil, a soldier of darkness, and the forces are returning. And Jakar really wanted to hear more, and Londo was very dismissive. Sheridan, to his credit, said, yeah, I don't have to believe in that to know that there is something going on here.
Mm-hmm.
He's already ordered that this woman be under 24-hour guard and watch, not just by Dr. Franklin, because he sees that Franklin was protesting that the relationship was professional, and at that stage it was, but it didn't take long.
It was, I mean, when he says I don't sleep with my patients, they had kissed. Like, you are led to believe that other things might have happened as soon as he says I spent the whole night with her. Like, that was scripted that way to make you do a double take. But it is what it is. The redirection with her as the possible threat was interesting because she is the only person on the the station who is new. And now there's a threat on the station. So the idea that she's like a shapeshifter or something was an interesting sort of red herring storytelling device. But looking back on it, once you know the ending, there's nothing specific to really make you believe it is her, except everyone's suspicions.
Yeah, it's just because someone had been killed on that ship before it arrived, in the same way as the people on the station, you assume it's the same killer.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, I never really found her a viable alternative, but partly because when they open that chamber, there is that whoosh of air and energy. It's like some sort of white gas that comes out.
Mm-hmm.
And all 4 actors look up simultaneously at where that gas is going, which to me said they were directed to draw attention to it so that the viewers notice it. And in a sci-fi show, that usually means that gas is important.
Right.
And often
right.
evil. So I think even the first time through, I was thinking, yeah, she's just the red herring. She's too obvious, so it's going to be whatever thing came out of that.
And the idea that she could be not herself, but somebody substituting in for her, that's all. It's interesting because it's playing on tropes that we are familiar with and letting them be part of the story, but also not super leaning into them. Like I said, they don't do a whole lot to cast suspicion on her. It just feels natural that everyone would suspect her because she's the only new person on the station. Now people are dying.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but we got to talk about her and Franklin. So, the way the story is presented to us, she and her husband volunteered for Deep Space Mission. They went to stasis, and whenever she woke up, he was dead. So if you want to liken that to Planet of the Apes or Alien or any of those things where people wake up and, all the stasis chambers need to have worked correctly and not all of them did, that's something we've seen before. And from her perspective, she has gone to sleep just the night before. And now that she's under suspicion and having to deal with everything on the station, she and Franklin kiss. Now, there are different ways to look at this. We can look at this from a character point of view. We can look at this from a writer point of view. From a character point of view, I expected better from Franklin. Like, he is usually a better guy than that. And I was kind of surprised that he let himself be unprofessional with her like that. Now, on the other hand, he does immediately recant and say this is not appropriate at this time. And that's good. But she leans into him too. And that feels weird. That she's kissing another man the next day after saying goodnight to her husband.
Yeah, I think that's after she passed out and woke up in his apartment. We don't know how long she was unconscious. Maybe he greeted her the next morning. But still, I would be shocked if even 48 hours have gone by.
Right. And how many of those did she spend awake and conscious, processing life?
Yeah. So for her mind, it may not be the next day, but it's not much later than the day after. It's still incredibly rushed.
Mm-hmm. And like you said, they do mention that she and her husband did not have the best relationship, but I don't think that entirely excuses the, I don't know. And from a writing perspective, it feels weird to have this automatically must be romantic, even though, like I said, she's only been conscious for a matter of hours or a day.
Yeah. Scott Frost, in his notes in the other voices, he didn't have as much to say as other writers because he wasn't on set when it was filmed. I suspect that was his choice. The wording he uses is vague about whether he was invited or not. It was over 20 years later. He may not even remember if he was invited or not, but the other writers who talked about how wonderful it was to have been invited onto the set, he didn't choose to go. So I suspect he was invited. It might have been a schedule conflict because he was writing a few things during this TV season. So he might have been unable to come to set because he had to go do something elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
But because of that, he doesn't have a lot to say about it. Just going back and rereading it on a script level, he does wish that he'd spent a little more time building the relationship between them, even if it was just a time lapse between episodes, so that it maybe imply that, they'd spent a couple of weeks going through her recovery before things started moving forward.
Right.
But he does agree that it was rushed.
The idea that they get together, or at least that they flirt with the idea of getting together, is not so much a problem as the timing and just how fast it is. It does, make you wonder from a character point of view, like if she's that willing to kiss somebody the day after she said goodnight to her husband, then what has her life been like before this?
Yeah, it made me wonder how many of the problems in their relationships when they split up were because that maybe she has a hard time being faithful.
Right. And from a writing perspective, the fact that he's man, she's woman, and therefore they must have a romantic connection is a tired trope. The fact that they're both black, so therefore they must get together, that feels tired. It's just, weird all around.
There's nothing in the script that would tell you that they're both black, so I'm hoping that that was a coincidence and side effect of the fact that the best auditions they had for those roles were from black actors.
It can be a coincidence, but the optics are still there.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally get what you're saying. It would have been nice if it was, if either they'd spent more time with it, or if there was no romantic entanglement, and Dr. Franklin just said, it can't be her because I was with her at the time.
Right.
Just legitimately taking care of her. Like, he didn't need to be romantically involved to be the one who helps her get acclimated to waking up 100 years in the future, when we probably have had more technological advancements, I'm guessing, than in any other 100 years, because we've been buying advanced alien technology in that time, like getting the jump gate technology from the Centauri.
Right. The easy way to fix this would be to just have them not kiss. They could even make eye contact and just not do anything about it. I'm debating on whether or not they should take out the whole "I was with her all night" line, but since that line is immediately accompanied by clarification that it wasn't like that, it feels more okay. But if you wanted to do something with an attraction between them at the end as they're separating, I feel like would be a good time to at least acknowledge the fact that in another reality I could have called you boyfriend, to paraphrase a Romulan.
Yeah. Yeah, they could have kept that, if they wanted to keep the romantic entanglement at all. Like you're saying, I think the story works well.
It doesn't need it.
Yeah, Franklin could just say, no, I'm her alibi. She didn't do it.
So how do you feel about, what's his name, Arnis?
Amos.
Amos's religious fanaticism that seems to come and go. Like when he's manic, he's all about doomsaying and everything. But when he's not manic, it's not even a part of his conversations. It's not even a part of his personality. That felt uneven to me. How did you read that?
It was a little uneven, but the second time through, I was able to accept it better, because he talks about how he could still feel a piece of himself that's in that creature, and he can sense this creature. And that first manic outburst was what had arrived on the station.
Mm.
And then the others, it did seem to be tied to his proximity to the thing. So the presence of that thing seemed to be driving him. At least in the manic episodes we saw this time, it's implied that the manic episodes were not isolated to these 2 or 3 days.
Right, because he actually has his first episode before the Copernicus?
Yeah, just as it was getting close and they were docking it. So they hadn't opened it up yet, but they were bringing it closer.
Yeah, they're bringing it closer, and he is down where the lights are shining on him and everything. It's down in the lower levels.
Yeah, down below.
And he starts freaking out. So it does add a bit of menace to the opening bits of the episode, because this ship is approaching saying, "We come in peace. We come in peace." And yet they're freaking out that there's a monster aboard. And that adds a certain amount of menace that can help set the stage for wondering if it's Mariah, but ultimately they go a different direction with it. So that monster at the end, he has the whole predator cloaking field thing going on, with horns, and they keep on saying he is going to look like something out of the past, which feels lore centered or rooted in other concepts that are going to come out later. And of course, Jakar is looking at a book with a picture of the creature in it. And since he's headed for the Rim, and that one place whose name I can never remember, Jadum or something? Zahadum. It makes me wonder if he is or is related to the Shadows. And of course, you're not going to answer that question, but I'm just talking out loud about my thoughts.
That's actually a question that JMS openly answered almost immediately after the episode aired.
Okay.
Because it was implied in dialogue when they called him a soldier of darkness, and the forces of darkness are gathering their forces. So this thing is not a shadow, but it's a close ally to the Shadows.
Gotcha.
And we did get a little bit of the image because Amos had said it was like they opened up hell itself. And when we see flashes of Mariah's nightmares, we do see it more clearly. So it is a red-skinned horn thing. I say more clearly. I think we have maybe cumulative in 3 shots, maybe 2 seconds of footage of the thing.
Right.
When it's not invisible.
But it is meant to evoke something hellish, demonic, satanic, and with the red skin and the horns and everything.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. It feels like a first season kind of seeding of the future by doing this thing that feels unrelated to everything except for the end whenever they say it's related to everything, which the first season episodes don't come out at the end and say, hey, this is related to other things. They just, let you wonder. But this one does, which I think is probably part of the storytelling choices for the season as they're building things. They're wanting to make sure it's intentional that they're, or at least not intentional, visible that they're building things.
Yeah, they're putting up more signposts, and sometimes that's to say, yes, this is part of the big story, and sometimes that's to say, hey, focus on the right-hand path. Don't look too hard at the left.
Right.
Because some of these things have more than one purpose.
And in the context of the reveal at the end that it was heading for the rim, the fact that Londo is so dismissive of it and Jakar is so interested plays into our ongoing plot lines.
Yeah. Particularly since, as you said, Jakar has seen images of this sort of thing in the Book of Jaquan.
Mm-hmm.
So, the other major regret that Frost mentions, and that JMS mentioned as well, is that they weren't quite at the stage where the effects for the final confrontation were ready to do what they wanted to do. So when they gun down the invisible beast, it's not as impressive as any of them wanted it to be.
It felt slightly off, but also I had never noticed the gunfire of their pistols being so spurty. Like, they're certainly not nice, clean laser beams. It looks like they are firing off actual sparks from, practical effects in their hands. But maybe maybe that's also, inserted in post, but it looked like they were.
Yeah, those are coming in post. They're meant to be, I think it's phased plasma gun is what PPG stands for.
Okay.
So the idea is that they are spraying the hot plasma. This plasma is not plasma in the biology sense, it's plasma in the physics sense. So these are atoms heated up so much that they haven't just gone from solid to liquid to gas, but now that gas has evaporated so that the nuclei and the electrons have separated.
Right.
So it's just a mass of
highly
particles. Charged,
yeah.
Yeah. So which will be highly disruptive to anything they hit, although the question is how they can keep them bunched together. It would put a limit on the range of the weapons, because they would naturally recombine as they go, releasing more energy along the way. So
it's interesting that the effects they did for the firing were relatively short range effects, and yet they're shooting something far, far away.
Yeah. Or perhaps not super far, but yeah, definitely, several meters or yards, depending on which country you're in.
But yeah, the other characters in the show, except for Garibaldi and Franklin, don't really have much to do here. Garibaldi's mainly here to investigate and to help Amos feel sympathetic. And I want to come back to him when we get to Last Best Hope. But Sheridan did have like a growly moment where I kind of felt like, he's still showing himself to be different to Sinclair.
Yes, which specific moment did you have in mind?
I'm trying to remember. That's why I was so generic and vague about it. I remember him snapping at somebody. Was it Franklin?
Yeah, I do remember him snapping a little bit at Franklin after Franklin said, yeah, it wasn't like that. I don't sleep with my patients. And he specifically says, well, she's going to be under 24-hour guard and not from you.
Right. Which, honestly, that's fair. Conflict of interest, romantic possibilities. You just want to safeguard everything in a sticky situation like this.
Yeah, he had the reason I asked, because he kind of had 2 growly moments. There was that one, and there was the one in the council chambers when the Marquette ambassador is saying, if you don't take care of her, we will. And Sheridan basically stands up and says, no, vigilantism will not be tolerated on this station.
Right.
Does not use those words, but he sends that message. So yeah, once with Franklin, and then again with the Marquette ambassador.
But yeah, I think that's everything I had for the episode.
Yeah, I didn't have a lot more for our League in session where we just have our general discussion, so let's move on to that last best hope that you had just teased for us.
So, we spend the entire episode with Amos being a bit crazy and saying a lot of things that seem to be completely out of left field. And Garibaldi wants to give him the benefit of the doubt because he's been through similar experiences. He tells us that, the things you're hearing Amos say during his sleep, he's had the same dreams. What I really, really, really liked was when Garibaldi allows Amos to show him where he saw the monster, whatever it was. They get there and there's no evidence of anything. But instead of writing him off, Garibaldi's like, okay, you know what? Sometimes there's a threat and you try to point it out and it can't be seen. That happens. I've seen it before. So even though everything seems to, cast doubt on you as a person, I'm still going to choose to believe you. And I just felt like that was a really good amount of, a good moment of camaraderie, of sympathy, and just support that Amos needed. And I think Garibaldi needed to give.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Actually, my pick, I think, is from that same scene where Garibaldi's, if I'm picturing it correctly, I might be picturing an earlier scene where Garibaldi basically tells him, I can introduce you to some great counselors. Right? I've used them myself, which I thought was a very nice line to say that, yeah, he's been a soldier in the war. And when good people sign up for the military for the right reasons and actually serve in a war, it is really difficult to come back to your normal lives because you have to do the kinds of things that are not instinctive.
Right.
For those people. So I like the acknowledgement of the fact that war damages people.
Mm-hmm.
Especially as he called it, the ground pounders, the gropos, when they're out there on the ground. So that was good. And I like Garibaldi's treatment the whole time, right from when he's in there and he tells the original guard, like, well, yeah, this guy saw combat, so back off him. And that guard, we didn't mention him in the credits. He was uncredited. He's Michael Sorcy, who doesn't have a lot of credits on the IMDb.
Right.
He's been in one episode of Briscoe County, this one episode of Avalon 5, and 2 episodes of King of Queens. And in all 4 of those appearances, there's one where he's got a name Mike. Apparently, he's best known as Don Geronimo in the Don and Mike syndicated radio show. Which I'm guessing it's not syndicated to Canada because I don't think I've ever heard of the official Don and Mike show.
You don't know Don and Mike? Okay.
No.
Nor do I.
Okay. But
it reminds me of, was it The Sandman? There's the issue, 24 Hours, where Dr. Destiny, John Destiny, is in the diner and he's causing basically dreams all over the country or the world to get disrupted. And they do an interview with this middle-aged, older man and woman who are the local superheroes of, some tiny town in the middle of, I don't know, Tennessee or something. And it's like, something like The Amazing Eddie and Billy. And now we're here talking to Eddie of The Amazing Eddie and Billy. And he's like, yeah, well, me and Billy, we think it's aliens or something like that. And it's just one of those things where if you have a name or a credit, you might sound more important than maybe it really is from the outside perspective. I don't know. It doesn't matter, but that's what it reminded me of.
Okay. Actually, now that I mention that, there was an uncredited guard, but now there's a credited guard as well. So I might have mixed up which one was the guard in that scene. The credited guard, he appears as a guard in 3 episodes, and this is the 3rd of them. So I think that's the one I'm thinking of, who'd already been in Revelations and Geometry of Shadows.
Okay.
So in any event, I actually wasn't super impressed with his delivery, but that was part of what stuck with me was when Garibaldi says, did you serve in the war? And he says, no, I missed it. Like it was something he was looking forward to. That, I don't know, my personal politics of war, but that rubbed me the wrong way.
And yet it's a thing that exists. Yeah. It's not an attitude that I love, but it's an attitude that I see.
Yeah. So, I don't know. The delivery it seemed pretty flat to me. I'm going to hope that it's flat, not because the actor is a poor actor, but because he struggles putting himself in the mindset of someone who has that opinion or that attitude. So, but that's my last best hope is also Garibaldi's acceptance and just general attitude towards Amos. Just saying, okay, yeah, I get where you're coming from. Let me help you. Especially that the mention of the counselors and how, yeah, they can genuinely help.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because that's, I don't know, I am not a decision maker, but anyone who's seen combat, I think the least we could do for that veteran is taxpayer-funded psychological care for life.
Get them the help they need.
Yep. Because as we said, if you go out to serve and take lives and come back unchanged, maybe you needed counseling before you left.
Maybe.
All right, so shall we move on to giving form to the dream?
Yeah. Most of what I think would go under here is stuff we've talked about earlier. This is not the first time we've heard them mention Zahadun by name, right? We've heard that before?
We've heard the name before, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. It was named by Jakar in a council session early on. And yeah, there's been rumors that they're gathering forces at the Rim. So this is reinforcing that concept, which, as you said, we have already seen before. So we have that. Now, there's the implication that this thing is building forces, and some of these aliens have technology or natural abilities that make it impossible for people to see them under normal circumstances.
Mm-hmm. Which can be helpful if your motif is shadows.
Yes. One other point, I originally mentioned this when we were discussing Geometry of Shadows, where there's a certain outfit that people are supposed to be wearing in the background. This one I'm less confident in, because part of the outfit includes a badge, and that's what makes it easiest to spot, although there is a specific style to the robes. But I believe I saw someone in this outfit at about the 15-minute mark behind Dr. Franklin as he is telling Mariah about the Minbari War. But that person is out of focus with their back to the camera. So I am not 100% confident, but I think we have seen another one here.
Okay.
So there's that. And the other piece is that, so this threat, this ally of the shadows, does appear to have been depicted in the Book of Shaquan.
Which is interesting, just that Jakar seems to have information about all this, but we heard that at the very beginning. The whole reason he went investigating the Rim in the first place is because he had suspicions based on information he knew. So the idea that this book would continue to support his questions, if not the answers to those questions, is good.
Yeah, so Shaquan was definitely writing about this stuff.
We should go ask him about it. Hey, Shaquan, what's up?
Mm-hmm. Well, let's see, the series takes place about 200 years in the future, so Shaquan's been dead about 800 years now.
Oh. Well, if you want to get technical about it.
Yes. Well, who knows? Maybe we'll be able to get the answers straight from Shaquan in the future, because we don't know when Babylon 4 was going to, and we don't know if we're going to see it again.
Well, the royal we. You know.
Yes. Speaking for the first-time viewers. These are, I don't know. Because this is so intricate, I like to throw out questions which may or may not be answered just to keep people guessing. Because if I only ask the questions that will be answered, then that becomes a signpost.
Oh. So you're being tricksy.
At times, yes. All right, but you know what we won't trick people with?
So,
information about how to contact us.
How to contact us. Feedback. We love it.
We do. We appreciate knowing that, hopefully there's someone out there enjoying what we are doing. Even though it probably wouldn't stop us from making it without feedback because we're enjoying doing it. But still, it's nice to know that waking up at 4 a.m. every Sunday is not a bad thing.
And also you can send us money. That'll help us feel even better about it, but you don't have to do that. Feedback is good.
Yes, so you can send that feedback to us in multiple ways. One of them is directly by email. Babylon5 30 years later at gmail.com. Use numbers or the numerals or the words to represent the numbers in those email addresses. They will come to us.
You can also leave comments on our websites. The show is posted on 2 sites, the first of which is mine, johnreadscomics.com, where you can leave a comment on the episode and we'll read it in the feedback, future feedback special. And you can also check out other podcasts that I've done there.
You can also leave feedback on the posts at bureau42.com, which has posts for all of my podcasts and more.
And finally, there is the, not finally, but also there are the podcatchers that are out there that allow you to leave reviews. So if you like the show, if you like what we're doing, and you want other people to know that this is a worthwhile thing to listen to, then leave a review. Say nice things. Or say mean things very quietly. However, if you use a podcatcher other than Apple Podcasts that allows you to leave a review, we may not catch that. So just send us a line somehow, some way to let us know that you're leaving the review, and we will happily acknowledge you and thank you on the air.
And the other point is to leave comments on our YouTube posts. So every episode is automatically cross-posted to YouTube. And I will just be manually curating the playlists for whether you want just the broadcast content or just the feedback episodes or whatever, or just season 1 or just season 2. So we'll have all of that coverage kind of sliced and diced and collated in an assortment of playlists. We will also have links to the YouTube channels of some of our past guests and friends, such as Mark Scott Zickery's channel is linked through there, who was the writer of Season 1, Episode 11, who was kind enough to join us to discuss it. And we have also links to Word Balloon channels for, I said Word Balloon, YouTube channels for other people who have agreed to come on the show at some point or another. And I may have just tipped my hat a little on one of those.
Yeah, don't give things away, Blaine. Had to keep our surprise guests a surprise.
Yes. Yeah, not because we're too worried about things not working out. I'm confident that the guests that we have lined up who say, I want to talk about this, want to come on and talk about this, but sometimes schedule conflicts happen.
Right.
Okay, so we're just going to end with a couple of notes. So should let you know that our next episode will be out 1 week from now. It's Spider in the Web, directed by Kevin G. Kremen and written by Larry DiTilio.
So be here next week for that.
All right. So aside from that, just thank you for listening.
And good eating to you.